Hey everybody, my name is Mike Schramm. Super happy to be here with GDC today. It's been a dream of mine to be able to give a talk by myself here on this stage, virtual as it may be today. So thanks very much for joining me. I've got a lot to get through, so I'm gonna move kind of quickly today, but stick with me. I've got a lot of different stuff to talk about. I hope you enjoy. Hope you enjoy all the different things and all the different variety that I'm going to throw in the talk here. First, I want to walk through my career just a little bit. I started working as a freelance writer. I wrote on a bunch of different game blogs. I wrote on WoW Insider. I wrote on the unofficial Apple weblog. Also a great blog called Joystick, which is no longer around. None of these are around anymore, but I had a great time working on them with a lot of great people, writing about game reviews, game news, and different things like that back in the day. In 2013, I joined EDAR. EDAR stands for Electronic Entertainment Design and Research. It's a company founded on the idea that you could use data to make better video game decisions, and that's kind of given me my career goal, my kind of career outlook here. EDAR was acquired by NPD a few years after I joined. NPD is the provider of the games industry's sales data. I got to play with that data while I worked at NPD. I also worked on books and toys and got to understand those audiences and why people buy those products, what people are interested in there. And then back in January of 2020, I joined Interpret. Interpret is a terrific company. We are only about 50 people, but we punch above our weight. We work with some of the industry's biggest developers and publishers. We work all around the world in London, all across Europe, in the US, in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Dallas. And we also have offices in China and Japan as well. So we work all over the world. Great company to work with. Excited to be a part of Interpret. I work in games research, and just before we get started, a quick definition for you. Games research is the practice of using scientific methodologies from all kinds of different fields: sociology, data science, engineering, psychology, economics, communication. I'm going to talk about all those fields today. One reason why I have so much stuff in my talk. And you use those methodologies to gather information in order to solve game design, marketing, and business problems. So that's the idea. We use scientific methodologies to help you solve problems around making games, selling games, marketing games, all the different stuff that you're working on here at GDC. So today I'm going to talk about 6 different powerful lessons that I've learned from games research. They are broadly applicable insights that I have sort of gathered in my time as a games researcher. The idea today is not only to walk through all these insights and provide you with some, I think, really applicable information, but also kind of show you how games researchers think about games, how we think about our work, and then also hopefully give you some information to help you make and market better games. I think my whole point is to use research and science to make games better, and that's what I'm here to help you do today. First lesson is just pretty basic. Research leads to insight. I want to kind of show you how research works, how it can help you. Research, as I mentioned, uses a methodology to gather and analyze data. And methodology is really important. I kind of highlighted the word there because methodology is extremely important. When you have a methodology that is clear and repeatable, everybody can agree on it, and they can kind of agree on the result. They can agree that we got to this point, we got to this result by following this methodology. And that's really important in games design, because sometimes you do need your organization to go, here is the flag that we're going for. Like, here's what we all agree on. Research helps you do that. Research can involve numeric data or descriptive data. We call numeric research quantitative. We call descriptive research, like interviews, talking about what people are thinking and feeling through language. That's all called qualitative. Some people look down a little bit on qualitative research and say it's not quite as helpful as quantitative research. Everyone says, oh, we need data-driven decisions. And I think you do need data-driven decisions, but I do think that qualitative research can be really helpful as well, and I'll talk a lot about it during our talk today. And research, the first lesson here is that it can lead to conclusive business insights. It can also validate your thoughts. If you have a theory, research can help you validate it or not. And it can also just give you guidance. Sometimes in research, you don't quite find the answer you need, but it gives you some information that leads you to a better answer in the future. So research, it does lead you to valuable insights, but the insights that you find might not always be exactly what you're looking for, but they will always give you a step forward or help you understand something better in the future. So let's try to take on a simple problem here just to kind of show you how research can help. And this is extremely simple. Let's say we're all making a game and we have 2 different types of levels in our game. We have desert levels and we have snow levels and desert levels. Question is, what type of levels should we make? We're going to make some DLC. We need to make some more levels. What type of levels should we make? So the game director for this game, needs to gather some information, needs to do some research and figure out what to do. So she starts looking around and tries to find out some information for what types of levels we should make. She finds out that snow levels are cheaper and easier to make, That could be important. We always want to make things as cheaply as possible, as long as they're good quality. We also learned that the CEO's kids love snow. So the CEO definitely wants to make more snow levels. You may laugh, but I know of game companies where that is the level of information that they're making decisions with. So hopefully we can find information that's a little bit more conclusive than that. For desert levels, we learned that Reddit seems to like desert levels for some reason. Reddit really enjoys them. Again, that sometimes is the level of information that we're making decisions with. And desert levels, we learned, don't monetize as well. So people don't spend quite as much in the desert levels as they spend in the snow levels. That might be a point in snow levels' favor. But the main point here is that this information is very random. It's very unorganized. It's not put together. There's no methodology here. We just sort of gathered a bunch of information. We don't have an actual methodology. Now, the game director also talks to the marketing department or talks to the accounting department, and they say, oh, we did a study a little while back, and the study showed us that more playtime in this game equaled more monetization. When people spend more playtime, they spend more time in the game, they actually monetize better. So the game director says, we could look at playtime. Let's look at the average played time for snow levels and the average played time for desert levels and compare those, and maybe that will provide us with an answer that's clear. And sure enough, when you calculate the average snow played hours, you get about 13 hours. When you calculate the desert played average, you get 32 hours, which is much higher. So your insight is that average desert play time is 3 times higher. So the answer is to make more desert levels. Now, obviously, I walked you kind of quickly through that and kind of jumped to an answer. But the point is, this is a methodology. Calculating the average and determining which one is higher is a methodology, and it has led us to a pretty clear answer here. It might not be the methodology that you like or the methodology that's most useful, but it is a methodology, and it led us to a very clear answer. And no one can disagree that these are the averages of the snow played hours, and no one can disagree that desert played hours is clearly higher than snow. And the other good thing about this methodology is that it is sturdy in that in the future, if the data changes, the methodology still holds up. If in the future snow played hours are higher, then the answer will be different, but the methodology can stay the same. So that was very simple, I know. And I know, if you are a researcher, you're like, well, there's lots more methodology we can use and there's lots more things we could do here. But the point is, a problem. We started with a problem and a bunch of random unorganized information. We used research, we used a methodology to get to an insight. That's how research helps you. It allows you to take a bunch of information, put it in an order, put it into a methodology that makes sense and that can be followed and be repeated, and it leads you to an insight, which allows you to make better decisions in the future. The second lesson here is how to predict fun. Predict fun. Follow the fun is maybe something you've heard at GDC before. It's pretty standard, common GDC advice. Mark LeBlanc did a great series of workshops about following the fun. Dan Nanny has a talk in the GDC Vault. And this talk, if you really enjoy it, will also eventually be in the GDC Vault, which I'm very proud of. I love the GDC Vault. It's a great resource. And there's also a great channel on YouTube called Game Maker's Toolkit that talks about following the fun. The idea of following the fun, obviously, is that you create a lot. If you find something that is really fun, like a mechanic or a level, you support that, you make more of it, you do more of that. If you find something that's not fun, you cut it out of scope, you avoid it, you lose it. You follow the fun, you fail fast, you iterate fast, and you follow the fun. But I'm here to tell you today that following the fun is almost impossible. It's extremely hard. You're a developer, you're sitting there playing your game, you're finding stuff that's fun, you're following what's fun in the moment. But when you're making a game, you're not actually trying to follow the fun. I'm here to tell you that you're actually trying to predict the fun. You're trying to predict future fun. You're trying to predict when you're making the game, what will be fun when the game is released. This is you, the developer, in the future. You're actually trying to find out what will be fun when the game is released, what will be fun in the future. And you're not just trying to predict for yourself, you're trying to predict for your players. And your players may not even look like this, but this is people, this is one of your players. You may not think of your players when you think of this, but you're trying to predict what your player thinks of as fun. Or, and I'm here to tell you this too, your players are more varied and more wild than you can ever imagine. Sometimes we're re-releasing games 20 years after the fact. It is almost impossible to predict 20 years in the future what someone will find fun. No wonder game development is so hard. No wonder so many games fail, because it's so hard to think towards the future and predict what you think will be fun for someone else that you have never met and don't know. And in fact, it gets worse. Science tells us that we are bad predictors of future happiness in general. Not only is it very hard to predict what someone else will find fun, but we are actually pretty bad predictors of what makes us happy. There's a great book called Stumbling on Happiness by Dan Gilbert. I highly recommend, I'm going to recommend a couple different books today. I highly recommend this one too. And he says that when we are thinking about what future happiness looks like, what will make us happy in the future, when we wonder if we'll like something or not, we are bad predictors. We make bad decisions. And the reason we make bad decisions is because instead of looking at the actual information, instead of looking at the truth, we think back to our memory and we think forward to our imagination. We use our memory and our imagination to make decisions about what will be good for us in the future. But Dan Gilbert says, unfortunately, our memory and our imagination are both inaccurate. They're both wrong. I would suggest that when we're making decisions about games, we're doing this exact same thing. If you're thinking of buying or playing a game, or if you're trying to design a game for someone in the future, you are using your memory and your imagination to make that decision, and you are making bad decisions. And that's why so many games fail. People buy games that they don't like, or people make games that they think are going to be good but turn out to be really bad. So how do we solve this problem? How do we make good predictions of future happiness? Well, Dan Gilbert says that if you're trying to make a decision about future happiness, if you're trying to decide whether you're going to move to Omaha or marry someone that your parents don't like, the thing you should do is ask someone else. Ask someone else who's just done it. If you're trying to decide whether or not to move to Omaha, ask someone who just moved there. Ask them if they're happy or not. And because they are so much more closer to the situation, because they are so much more familiar with the actual reality of the situation, they will give you a good answer. In games research, this looks like focus groups and playtests. Focus groups and playtests are a methodology that we use to determine whether your game is fun or not. And a lot of people look down on focus groups and playtests, but I'm here to tell you that they're actually extremely helpful because they give you that perspective of that player that you can't otherwise imagine. They let you understand where that player comes from. Now, the methodology that we use in focus groups and playtests is most often observation. We observe body language, we observe what people say, we interview people about the playtest, but we also observe memory. Memory is really important because memory is tied to interest. What we'll do sometimes in a playtest is we'll show people a trailer, or we'll let them play through a part of a game, and then we'll turn the game off, we'll turn the trailer off, and we'll say, what do you remember about that trailer? What stands out to you about that game? And the reason we do that is because scientifically we have shown that what we remember, we are interested in, and what we're interested in, we remember. If you see a trailer and you remember specific parts of it, those are the parts that you're most interested in. And actually, we found that it works the other way as well. If you're really interested in, say, elephants, and you read an article about elephants, you are more likely to remember more from that article because it's about a subject that you're interested in. So it works both ways. What we remember, we are interested in, and what we are interested in, we remember. There are lots of researchers working on this type of thinking. Kay Ann Reniger and Suzanne Heidi are two of them. They're doing an amazing job coming up with some of this stuff. They're working mostly in education because there's a lot of applications here for education, although I think education is relatively close to gaming in terms of practice and memory and exercises, things like that. They came up with a 4-phase model of interest development, and unfortunately, it's probably a little too complicated for me to hit on here, but it's so fascinating I wanted to tell you about it. They say that when you first start thinking about stuff, you think about situational interest. Situational interest is things you're interested in the moment. So like, where's the bathroom? Or where's the exit for this level? Or how do I solve this puzzle? That's situational interest. When you first start out, that stuff is it's triggered by the environment. It's triggered by your specific setting, the specific situation that you're in. But then if you experience those situational interest points quite a bit, that leads to what they call individual interest. Individual interest is the interest that you carry around with you as a person. Like if you're really into basketball or you're really into macrame, those are your individual interests. And what they're finding is that situational interest, like curiosity in the moment, like what are they doing over there? What's that game they're playing with the ball in the hoop? That situational interest over time leads to individual interests. I think this has direct applications for game development because situational interests, like if a game can be really interesting and can create curiosity in the moment, if people spend enough time with that game, they eventually become a fan of the game, of the franchise, of the experience. So I think even though this research is mostly from education, I think there's lots of applications here for gaming. Now, if you're interested in interest, then you're interested in memory. So you need to better understand more about memory. And lesson number 3 is about what memories are made of. So remember, if you will, we are bad predictors of future happiness because we rely too much on our memory and our imagination. Both of those are inaccurate. I don't have to tell you too much about imagination and how it's inaccurate. Just imagine yourself winning the lottery. You haven't won the lottery, therefore your imagination is inaccurate. And in fact, that's why lottery is so successful, because so many people imagine themselves winning, when in reality, mathematically, that's not very likely to happen. Your memory is also inaccurate. And the really interesting thing about memory is that it is specifically inaccurate. Science has found ways in that your memory is inaccurate just the same as the next person's memory or someone else's memory. As humans, our memory is specifically inaccurate. There is an amazing book. If you read one book that I recommend in this talk, read this one. It's called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. And he says that we have two selves in ourself. We have two selves that we carry around. We have our present self. Your present self is the one listening to this talk right now. It's the one navigating your daily world. It's the one that's in the present moment. And you have your past self. And your present self, when you need to make a decision in the present, you refer to your past self or your memories to decide whether you're going to make that current decision or not. So if I say, hey, would you like a cupcake? You think back to all the situations in which you encountered cupcakes in the past, and you decide whether those were positive or negative. Maybe someone mentioned a cupcake to you once and told you it was really delicious. Maybe you had a cupcake at a birthday party and you had a great time and really enjoyed that cupcake. Or maybe you ate a cupcake once and felt really bad and your stomach hurt and you don't want a cupcake, but you think back to your memory and you make a decision based on all those things that you've seen in the past. But as you can see from the picture here, our memories are not accurate. They are faded, they are warped, and they're warped in specific ways. And what Kahneman found is that your memory is warped in a very specific way. Our past memories are influenced by the peak and the end of the experience that we're remembering. So if you think back to your cupcake memories, those memories are actually influenced by the peak and the end of the experience. And you might be pushed one way or another based on what those peak and end of the experience are. Kahneman did an experiment that really highlights this very well. He did 2 trials where he had people stick their hand into ice water. So a little bit painful, not super painful, but a little bit painful. In the first trial, he had them put their hand in painfully cold water for 60 seconds. In the second trial, he had them put their hand in painfully cold water for 90 seconds. Everybody in the study did both of these trials, but they did them in a randomized order. So some people did the 60-second trial first, some people did the 90-second trial first. At the end of the 90-second trial, he did a little thing where he turned up, I showed you this bowl here, but he had a way to control the temperature. He turned up the temperature at the end of the 90-second trial so that it was slightly warmer. He turned it up just a little bit warmer. And then what he did is he asked all these people who had done both these trials in randomized order, he said, which trial would you like to do again? Which one would you want to go through again? And what he found was that 80% of the people who reported feeling the slight warming chose to do the 90-second trial again. This is astounding to me. They chose 30 more seconds of pain just because their memory of that 90-second trial was slightly better. Because it was slightly warmer at the very end of the trial, they chose to do that second trial because they remembered it as better. Their memory led them astray. Now, this to me almost seems like mind control. You can affect the peak and the end of the experience, and that determines how people remember that experience. That's incredible. Your memories are affected by the peak and the end of your experience. Now, as game designers, you can affect the peak and the end of people's experiences when they're playing games. What is the most spectacular, notable moment in your game? And is it positive? If your game breaks and falls apart and your computer breaks in the middle of a game, that might be the peak or the valley of that experience. That might be what people remember the most. You can't necessarily affect the end of when people play your game, when they put the game down, because you can't predict that, but you can predict the end of multiplayer matches. You can predict the end of runs. Roguelikes do this extremely well. They give you rewards at the end of a run. Like when you walk away from the game, you think about the rewards that you just got. You can affect the end of chapters. You can affect the end of sessions. Ring Fit Adventure does that very well. When you finish a session, it kind of says, thanks for coming. We'll see you when you come back tomorrow. So if you affect the peak and the end of an experience, you can affect the memory of that experience. And there's great applications here for demos, vertical slices, prototypes. Affecting the peak and the end of an experience will affect that memory. If you can adjust the peak or the end to be really positive, you can make sure that the memory of that experience is more positive, and you can affect someone's interest in it. Because memory and interest are connected, you can affect people's memories and change their interests. Lesson number 4 is characters are what we remember. It's all about interest. These are some of the most popular characters in the world. When I worked at NPD, I worked at on all these different brands, and I had a lot of people coming to me and saying, how do I make my characters really interesting? Like, how do I make my characters as powerful as these? You got Batman, Superman, SpongeBob, Simpsons. Like, these are some of the biggest brands in the world. How do I make my characters or my brand this powerful? What it really came out as is, how do I make my characters feel authentic? How do I make my characters work? Like, how do I make them line up? And you can substitute characters for almost anything: brand, license, game service offering. How do I make my characters feel less like Superman 64, which is a terrible license game that people remember horribly? How do I make it feel more like Arkham Asylum, which is a brilliant game that really changed how people saw license games? How do I make it feel less like the dumb Superman game? How do I make it feel more like people feel like they're actually playing like Batman? And the answer that I landed on at NPD was, characters feel authentic when they do what we remember them doing. Characters feel authentic when they do what we remember them doing. Mario jumps. That's what Mario does. When we see Mario jump, we remember, oh yes, that's Mario, and he jumps. And obviously his costume, we remember that. It's very clear, it's very effective. But the fact is, the very first thing we ever saw Mario do was jump. That's what he does in all his games. He jumps. And characters feel authentic when they do what we remember them doing. Solid Snake hides. That's what he does in Metal Gear Solid. That's why that series. That's one reason why that series is so powerful. Netflix goes done. The Switch goes, like, when characters and when brands and when things do what we remember them doing, that's when they feel authentic. That's when we feel connected to them. There's a couple different reasons for this. One is the mere exposure effect. The mere exposure effect is a psychological phenomenon where if you see something and it doesn't hurt you or kill you, you will like it better. It's just a core truth of humanity. It's how advertising works. And in fact, advertising has actually used the mere exposure effect to make you like all kinds of stuff that's not very good for you. Because you see it so often, you tend to like it better. You tend to buy it more because you're more interested in it. And then the other thing about brand reactions require recognition. If you can't recognize the subject of the reaction, if you can't recognize the stimulus, you're not going to have the same reaction. So if you're not getting the reaction you want, maybe it's because people can't even recognize your brand, can't even recognize your characters. Let's talk a little bit about Sonic. This is the original design of Sonic before he got edited for the movie. This is the final design of the movie. And this original design did not go very well. This is usually remembered as a situation of fanboys being angry on the internet. But I think this was actually a pretty well-researched change because Sony brought in a guy named Tyson Hesse to redesign Sonic, and this turned out to be the highest-grossing video game movie of all time. So I think this is actually a pretty effective change. It's not just about people getting angry on the internet. Why did this happen? Why did Sony miss this? Like, why didn't Sony understand this? Well, because the original attempt was not really centered on Sonic. The idea was to make Sonic more realistic, and the artist who designed him used a real hedgehog. And when you compare Sonic in the movie, the original Sonic, to a real hedgehog, it's pretty accurate, pretty close. Like, the nose works pretty well. It lines up pretty well to what you would expect from a real hedgehog. But people didn't go to the Sonic movie or didn't plan to go to the Sonic movie expecting to see a real hedgehog. They expected to see Sonic. This is the cover of Sonic the Hedgehog, the highest grossing, the most popular Sonic game ever made. This is what most people, especially older people, remember as Sonic, this Sonic in this game. And as you can already see, the original Sonic is way different from the Sonic, but this one is much closer. The eyes are bigger, the eyes are greener and more colorful. The mouth shape is different. The chin looks more different. The nose sticks out more. It's not as realistic. This is Sonic on the Dreamcast. If you're a little bit younger, this is the Sonic that you remember. And this is the Sonic that you look for. And as you can see, this Sonic is even closer to the final Sonic. And if you're younger than that, probably in the demographic of the Sonic movie, this is the Sonic you remember. Sonic Boom was a very popular cartoon on Cartoon Network. And this is the Sonic that you remember. That's why this Sonic on the left or on the right works so much better than the Sonic on the left, because this is the Sonic that people remember. Characters are what we remember. They do what we remember them doing, and they look the way we remember them looking. If you want to make your characters feel authentic, if you want to make your brand pop, if you want to make your brand connect with people, you have to make it familiar and recognizable. But familiarity is not all you need. You also need to combine it with something else to make it really stand out. Familiarity has diminishing returns over time. If people just see the same thing again and again, they'll recognize it, but they'll get tired of it. They won't be as interested. Hitmakers is a really terrific book called The Science of Popularity and Age of Distraction. He says that combining the familiar with the innovative is what creates hits that connect and resonate. Combining the familiar, the known, the nostalgic, the understood, with the innovative, the discovered, the exciting, the new, the really impactful, That's what creates hits that connect and resonate. There's all kinds of examples of this. Ready Player One is an example we could talk about. Old nostalgic characters combined with a cyberpunk dystopia in the future. That really resonates. It really connects with people, especially today, especially in these times. The Mandalorian also, it's a hugely popular series. And one of the reasons it's popular is because it connects a 1980s bounty hunter that had a lot of mystery around him with a brand new Game of Thrones actor and these new Unreal backgrounds. And even Baby Yoda, he's hiding right here in the corner. Baby Yoda combines something we all recognize, Yoda, an old, wise alien, with a new baby hipster. Like, it's old and new. You can't combine more clear examples of old, memorable, and then familiar, new, interesting all together. That's what makes Baby Yoda so successful. Marvel understands this too. Marvel has been doing this for years, combining the old, the memorable with new and interesting. They've done twists. They brought characters back. Now they're doing it with movies, and you're going to see it even more when they bring in the multiverse, bringing old stories in, combining them with new situations, new settings, new magic. We know this in games as well. Nintendo knows this extremely well. This is Super Mario 1-1. The first thing I said Mario does is he jumps. The second thing he does is beat that enemy. And the third thing he does is find coins. And that's what they've done over and over again. You combine those core Mario mechanics with new styles and new settings. And every time they do it, it works. It's a hit. Grand Theft Auto knows this as well. They took a 2D game. They took a 2D structure and a 2D aesthetic, and they brought it over into Grand Theft Auto 3. And kids these days, they look at Grand Theft Auto 5, and that's the Grand Theft Auto that they know. But really, Grand Theft Auto 3 was where that series really came into its own, because they took this 2D series that they had really built up, and they brought it and they connected it with 3D at the time, which, big cinematic storytelling, that's what really connected with people. Breath of the Wild is a perfect example of this as well. Old Legend of Zelda setting and structure combined with modern open world, a brand new physics system, combining those together made a mega hit. This is one of the best games of the last 5 years. It's still selling like crazy. And the reason is because it combines the familiar with the innovative. You don't need to be a giant company to do this. You don't need to be Rockstar or Nintendo. You can make Valheim. It's a 5-person team. They combine the crafty voxel survival mechanic of Minecraft and combine it with Norse mythology, which is currently on a comeback right now. They took the Minecraft setting, they kind of pulled it in with some new physics stuff and combined it with Norse mythology, and boom, you have a game that sold millions of copies in the first month or so and is still selling like crazy, and I think is going to be really big in the future as well. So combining the familiar with the innovative is what creates interest. This right here is the closest thing to a successful formula in games and media right now, taking something that people know, taking something that they're familiar with, that they remember, that they're nostalgic about, combining it with something new, interesting, that provides discovery, that reveals progress, creates interest, creates hits. If you have something that's familiar, combine it with something new. If you have something brand new, find something familiar that you can connect with. Now, I will say this is a pattern. We don't even really know why this works, but I have an inkling why it works, and we've talked about it already. Familiar has to do with memory. Innovation, new, exciting discovery, all has to do with imagination, things that are coming new in the future. And when you think about whether you're going to buy a game or not, you're using your memory and your imagination to make that decision. And I think that, and this is the edge of my knowledge here, but I think that when you have something that connects super strongly with memory, and you also have something that connects super strongly with imagination and what could be in the future, the reason it works is that you are using both of those faculties to make this decision. And when you have something that connects really strongly in both channels, that's what chooses you to buy it. That's how it connects up. The final lesson is that communication is key. If you look at all the lessons we've gone through so far, research leads to insight. Research is what finds these insights. The methodology, following the methodology, is what just helps you to discover new things and find new information. How to predict fun. Your memory and your imagination are what you use to make decisions. And when you as a developer are making a game, you're actually trying to predict in the future what someone else will think. That's very hard to do, and that's why we use focus groups and playtests. Memories are made of this. Your memory is not accurate. It's not representative of the real world. It's faded, it's warped. And the way it's warped is by the peak and the end of your experience. Characters are what we remember. Familiarity is what drives recognition. It's what the mere exposure effect allows us to like things that we're familiar with. And so if you want your character to be recognizable, do something that is recognizable. Do something that people will remember. And interest is where the old meets the new. Familiarity combined with innovation, memory combined with imagination is what creates interest, is what connects people with products and connects people with games that they love. Now, if you look across all these things, you can see that they're all about communication. And that's why the last lesson is communication is the key. Games research is about creating effective communication. Whenever I run a focus group, one of the last questions we have is, what is the one thing you'd like to tell the developers of this game? I almost always ask this in all my focus groups. I say, what is the one thing you'd like to tell the developers of this game? What's the one thing you'd like to share with them? And across almost all the focus groups I do, across different genres, different audiences, different types of games, different types of experiences, they say the same answer to this question. And the answer is, listen to your community. Notice they don't say, do what your community says. They say, listen to your community. They want to show that they're being listened to. They want to show that they're connecting with you. They want to show that that communication is coming across, that what you're presenting to them is being received by them, and what they're presenting back to you is being received by you. This relationship is super important. And this is what I think games research is all about, is building this relationship between creator and player. And when we in games research see problems, they largely are involved with this relationship, with this connection. We see a lack of clarity from the creator. The creator's not presenting a brand that is clear. They're not presenting a game or a premise or an element that is clear, and the players aren't understanding it. There can also be misunderstandings from players. Players might be saying something or experiencing something that the creator doesn't plan to have them experience, and there's a misunderstanding there that's not connecting up. On the creator side, they can have misunderstanding as well. The creator might be like, we think the audience is like this, when in reality, the audience is very different. Or we think that people will like this, when in reality, people like something else about that thing, or they like something different about that. And from the player, there might be a lack of clear channels for the player to provide their feedback. We talked to a lot of creators where they're like, well, we haven't talked to our players in a long time. We don't quite know what they think. In games research, what I'm finding is that removing these issues is how we solve these problems. When we remove these issues, we allow for this relationship to flourish. We allow for communication here to happen clearly and effectively as much as possible. When you make that communication clear and effective, that's when you have strong products. That's when you have a strong game. And that's what we do in games research. Thank you very much for watching the talk today. I crammed a lot of stuff in here. I hope you do follow some of those recommendations. Definitely read Thinking Fast and Slow, read Stumbling on Happiness, read Hitmakers. They're all great books. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.